Question 1. The analysis reveals that the Addis Ababa University Entrance Exam Administration team is experiencing significant delays in processing candidate applications and verifying submitted documents, leading to a backlog and potential applicant dissatisfaction. To address this, the team is considering several strategies to optimize the process. Which of the following strategies best aligns with the principles of efficient, fair, and compliant university entrance examination administration? Option A. Immediately switching to a fully automated online application system without prior testing or staff training, assuming it will resolve all current issues. Option B. Prioritizing the processing of applications from candidates who submit their documents earliest, regardless of completeness or accuracy. Option C. Implementing a phased approach to document verification, focusing on high-priority applicant categories first, while simultaneously digitizing common application forms for future use. Option D. Reducing the number of required documents for verification to speed up the process, without consulting university admissions policy. The correct answer is C. Implementing a phased approach to document verification, focusing on high-priority applicant categories first, while simultaneously digitizing common application forms for future use. Explanation. The analysis reveals a scenario where a university entrance exam administrator is tasked with optimizing the process of candidate registration and document verification. This is professionally challenging because it requires balancing efficiency with the integrity of the admissions process, ensuring fairness to all applicants, and adhering to Addis Ababa University's established regulations for entrance examinations. The administrator must consider potential bottlenecks, the accuracy of data entry, and the security of sensitive applicant information, all within the framework of university policy and national educational guidelines. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the current registration and verification workflow to identify specific points of inefficiency or potential error. This would include mapping the existing process, gathering feedback from staff and applicants, and then implementing targeted improvements such as digitizing forms where appropriate, streamlining communication channels, and providing clear, accessible instructions to applicants. This approach is correct because it is data-driven, applicant-centric, and aims for sustainable improvements that uphold the university's standards for a fair and transparent examination process. It aligns with the implicit regulatory expectation of responsible administration and resource management within an educational institution. An incorrect approach would be to implement changes without a thorough understanding of the current process or potential consequences. For instance, a hasty decision to entirely eliminate a verification step without adequate justification or alternative controls would be a regulatory failure. It could compromise the integrity of the applicant pool and violate the principle of due diligence expected in admissions. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize speed above all else, leading to rushed document checks that might miss discrepancies or errors, thereby undermining the fairness and accuracy of the entrance exam. This would be an ethical failure, as it disadvantages diligent applicants and potentially admits unqualified candidates. A third incorrect approach might involve introducing new technology without proper training or integration, leading to system errors and applicant frustration, which demonstrates a lack of professional foresight and adherence to best practices in process management. Professionals in such situations should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear definition of the problem and objectives. This should be followed by a comprehensive analysis of the current state, considering all relevant university policies and regulatory guidelines. Potential solutions should then be brainstormed, evaluated for their feasibility, impact, and compliance, and piloted if necessary. Finally, the chosen solution should be implemented with clear communication, adequate training, and a mechanism for ongoing monitoring and evaluation to ensure sustained effectiveness and adherence to all established standards. Question 2. Benchmark analysis indicates that prospective students preparing for the Addis Ababa University entrance exam often face pressure to achieve high scores. Considering the university's commitment to academic integrity and fair evaluation, which of the following student actions best reflects adherence to the established regulatory framework and ethical guidelines for the entrance examination? Option A. Accessing online forums during the exam to search for answers to specific questions. Option B. Communicating with a friend outside the examination hall during a scheduled break to confirm answers. Option C. relying solely on personal study and preparation, and completing the examination based on their own knowledge and understanding. Option D. Utilizing unauthorized study guides that claim to contain actual exam questions from previous years. The correct answer is C. Relying solely on personal study and preparation, and completing the examination based on their own knowledge and understanding. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a student's desire for academic advancement and the university's commitment to academic integrity and fair assessment. The pressure to perform well on the entrance exam, especially for a competitive program at Addis Ababa University, can lead students to seek an unfair advantage. Careful judgment is required to uphold the principles of academic honesty and ensure that all candidates are evaluated on their own merit. The correct approach involves a student recognizing the ethical implications of their actions and choosing to rely solely on their own preparation and understanding of the exam material. This aligns with the core principles of academic integrity, which are fundamental to the educational mission of Addis Ababa University. By refraining from any form of academic dishonesty, the student upholds the value of fair competition and respects the efforts of other candidates. This approach is ethically sound and directly supports the university's regulations against cheating and plagiarism, ensuring the validity of the entrance examination process. An incorrect approach would be to engage in any form of academic misconduct, such as attempting to obtain or use unauthorized materials during the exam. This directly violates the Addis Ababa University's strict policies on academic integrity, which are designed to safeguard the fairness and credibility of its admissions process. Such actions undermine the educational system by devaluing genuine achievement and creating an uneven playing field for all applicants. Furthermore, engaging in such behavior demonstrates a lack of respect for the institution and its commitment to ethical conduct. Another incorrect approach would be to seek assistance from individuals outside the examination setting during the exam itself, such as through unauthorized communication. This also constitutes a clear breach of examination regulations and is considered a form of cheating. It bypasses the intended assessment of individual knowledge and skills, thereby compromising the integrity of the entrance exam. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should begin with a clear understanding of the university's academic integrity policies and ethical guidelines. Students should critically evaluate the potential consequences of any action that might compromise these principles. Prioritizing honesty, fairness, and personal effort over shortcuts or unfair advantages is paramount. If faced with a situation that presents an ethical dilemma, seeking clarification from university officials or academic advisors is a responsible step. Ultimately, the decision should be guided by a commitment to upholding academic standards and personal integrity. Question 3. To address the challenge of maintaining the integrity of the Addis Ababa University entrance exam, a candidate observes a fellow student attempting to discreetly solicit answers from them during the examination. The candidate is aware of the strict rules against any form of academic dishonesty. Considering the regulatory framework and ethical guidelines governing university entrance examinations in Ethiopia, what is the most appropriate course of action for the candidate? Option A. Immediately and loudly report the friend's attempt to cheat to the invigilator without first attempting to de-escalate or refuse the request directly. Option B. Discreetly signal answers to the friend to help them pass the exam, believing that friendship outweighs strict adherence to rules in this instance. Option C. Offer to verbally share answers with the friend during a brief, seemingly innocent conversation. Assuming it will go unnoticed, Option D. Firmly refuse to provide any assistance and clearly state that sharing answers is against the exam rules and would have serious consequences for both individuals. The correct answer is D. Firmly refuse to provide any assistance and clearly state that sharing answers is against the exam rules and would have serious consequences for both individuals. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate the ethical and regulatory landscape of academic integrity within the context of the Addis Ababa University entrance exam framework. The core difficulty lies in balancing the desire to assist a peer with the absolute imperative to uphold the fairness and validity of the examination process, which is foundational to the university's admission standards. Misjudging this balance can lead to severe consequences, including the invalidation of the exam, disciplinary action for all involved, and damage to the reputation of both the individuals and the institution. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between permissible academic support and prohibited forms of assistance that compromise the integrity of the entrance exam. The correct approach involves recognizing the strict prohibition against any form of unauthorized assistance during the Addis Ababa University entrance exam. This approach prioritizes adherence to the established rules and regulations designed to ensure a fair and equitable assessment for all candidates. Specifically, it aligns with the principle that each candidate must demonstrate their own knowledge and abilities without external aid. The regulatory framework for university entrance exams, as understood within the Ethiopian context and specifically for Addis Ababa University, mandates a secure and independent testing environment. Providing or receiving assistance directly violates these regulations, undermining the purpose of the exam as a measure of individual merit. An incorrect approach of offering to share answers with a friend directly violates the Addis Ababa University entrance exam regulations concerning academic dishonesty. This action constitutes aiding and abetting cheating, which is a serious offense. The ethical failure here is a breach of honesty and fairness, as it creates an unfair advantage for one candidate over others who are undertaking the exam independently. Another incorrect approach of subtly indicating answers to a friend, even without explicit verbal communication, also constitutes a violation. This falls under the category of unauthorized assistance and attempts to circumvent the rules through indirect means. The regulatory framework aims to prevent any form of collusion or undue influence, and such subtle cues are considered a breach of exam integrity. The ethical failure is similar to the direct sharing of answers, as it still undermines the principle of independent assessment and fair competition. A third incorrect approach of reporting the friend's intention to cheat to the invigilator, while seemingly a responsible action, is also not the most appropriate initial step in this specific scenario as presented. While reporting misconduct is generally encouraged, the immediate context of being asked for assistance by a friend presents an opportunity for direct ethical intervention. The professional reasoning process should first involve a clear and firm refusal to participate in any form of cheating, explaining the severe consequences. If the friend persists or the situation escalates, then reporting becomes a necessary step. However, the primary ethical obligation in the moment of being asked is to refuse and uphold personal integrity. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should begin with a clear understanding of the relevant regulations and ethical codes governing academic assessments. When faced with a request for assistance that compromises integrity, first step is to firmly and unequivocally refuse. This refusal should be accompanied by a brief explanation of why such assistance is impermissible, highlighting the importance of academic honesty and the potential repercussions. Following this refusal, if the individual continues to solicit or engage in cheating, then escalating the issue by reporting to the appropriate authority, e.g., invigilator, examination board, becomes the next responsible course of action. This layered approach prioritizes personal integrity, direct ethical intervention, and, if necessary, adherence to formal reporting procedures. Question 4. The review process indicates that a faculty member involved in grading the Addis Ababa University entrance exam has a close relative who is also a candidate in the same examination cycle. The faculty member is aware of this familial relationship. What is the most ethically and regulatorily sound course of action for the faculty member? Option A. Discreetly provide the candidate with insights into the grading rubric to help them perform better. Option B. Immediately disclose the familial relationship to the University Admissions Committee and recuse themselves from any involvement in grading or evaluating the candidate's examination. Option C. Proceed with grading the candidate's examination as usual, assuming personal objectivity will prevent any bias. Option D. Inform the candidate's family members about the grading process and encourage them to advocate for the candidate. The correct answer is B. Immediately disclose the familial relationship to the University Admissions Committee and recuse themselves from any involvement in grading or evaluating the candidate's examination. Explanation. The review process indicates a potential conflict of interest scenario that requires careful ethical and regulatory consideration within the context of the Addis Ababa University entrance exam framework. The challenge lies in balancing the university's commitment to fair and impartial admissions with the personal relationships of individuals involved in the examination process. Adherence to the university's established ethical guidelines and admission regulations is paramount to maintaining the integrity of the entrance examination. The correct approach involves immediate and transparent disclosure of the relationship to the relevant university authorities responsible for overseeing the entrance examination. This allows the university to implement appropriate measures to mitigate any perceived or actual bias, such as reassigning the candidate's evaluation or ensuring an independent review of their application. This aligns with the ethical principle of avoiding conflicts of interest and upholding fairness, as mandated by the university's commitment to an equitable admission process. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the evaluation without disclosure, hoping that personal bias will not influence the outcome. This fails to address the potential for undue influence and violates the ethical obligation of transparency. It undermines the trust placed in the evaluator and the integrity of the examination system. Another incorrect approach would be to attempt to subtly favor the relative, perhaps by overlooking minor discrepancies or providing preferential treatment in the evaluation. This constitutes a direct breach of ethical conduct and university regulations, as it introduces bias and compromises the fairness of the admissions process. Finally, ignoring the situation and hoping it goes unnoticed is also an unacceptable approach, as it demonstrates a lack of professional responsibility and a disregard for established ethical standards and university policies. Professionals in such situations should follow a clear decision-making framework. 1. Identify the potential conflict of interest. 2. Consult relevant university policies and ethical guidelines. 3. Disclose the conflict to the appropriate authority immediately and in writing. 4. Follow the instructions provided by the university to manage or mitigate the conflict. 5. Document all actions taken. Question 5. What factors determine the most appropriate method for addressing potential bias in questions developed for the Addis Ababa University entrance exam, ensuring adherence to the exam's regulatory framework and ethical guidelines? Option A. Disregarding feedback on potential bias and proceeding with the question as originally drafted. Option B. Making arbitrary changes to the question without consulting relevant guidelines or experts. Option C. Making minor wording adjustments to the question without consulting experts or reviewing underlying bias concerns. Option D. Implementing a multi-stage review process involving subject matter experts and adherence to established question writing guidelines to identify and mitigate bias. Correct answer is D. Implementing a multi-stage review process involving subject matter experts and adherence to established question writing guidelines to identify and mitigate bias. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an applicant to demonstrate a nuanced understanding of the Addis Ababa University entrance exam's regulatory framework, specifically concerning the ethical considerations and procedural fairness in question development. The challenge lies in identifying the most appropriate method for addressing potential bias in exam questions, balancing the need for rigorous assessment with the imperative of fairness and adherence to established guidelines. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between superficial corrections and substantive improvements that align with the exam's stated objectives and ethical standards. The correct approach involves a systematic review process that prioritizes identifying and mitigating bias through expert consultation and adherence to established question writing guidelines. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the core ethical obligation of the examination board to ensure fairness and equity for all candidates. By involving subject matter experts and adhering to predefined guidelines for question development, the process minimizes the risk of subjective bias influencing the assessment. This aligns with the implicit regulatory expectation of any standardized examination to be objective, valid, and reliable, ensuring that performance is measured accurately and without prejudice. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on superficial edits without addressing the underlying potential for bias fails to meet the ethical and regulatory standards of a fair examination. Such an approach might involve minor wording changes that do not alter the inherent problematic nature of the question, thus perpetuating potential unfairness. Another incorrect approach, which involves disregarding the feedback entirely and proceeding with the question as is, represents a clear ethical failure and a violation of the principles of due process in assessment. This demonstrates a disregard for candidate fairness and the integrity of the examination process. A third incorrect approach, which involves making arbitrary changes without consulting relevant guidelines or experts, risks introducing new biases or compromising the question's validity and reliability, thereby failing to uphold professional standards. Professionals involved in exam development should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the examination's purpose and governing regulations. This includes familiarizing themselves with ethical guidelines concerning fairness, objectivity, and the avoidance of bias. When potential issues arise, the framework dictates a process of careful analysis, consultation with subject matter experts, and adherence to established review procedures. The goal is to ensure that all assessment instruments are valid, reliable, and equitable, reflecting the highest professional standards and regulatory compliance. Question 6. Benchmark analysis indicates that prospective students often seek assistance with their preparation for the Addis Ababa University entrance exam. A student approaches a tutor who is familiar with the exam structure and content, requesting help with specific practice questions that are representative of the actual exam. The student explicitly asks for the answers to these questions to ensure they get them right for their preparation. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical guidelines governing the Addis Ababa University entrance exam? Option A. Provide detailed explanations of the concepts and methodologies required to solve the practice questions, encouraging the student to work through the problems independently and offering guidance on their approach. Option B. Share answers to the practice questions directly, explaining that this will help the student quickly identify and correct their mistakes, thereby accelerating their preparation. Option C. Advise the student to focus solely on memorizing key facts and formulas, as this is often sufficient to pass the entrance exam, and avoid engaging with complex practice questions. Option D. Offer to provide a set of past exam papers with the solutions included, stating that this is the most efficient way to understand the exam's difficulty and expected responses. The correct answer is A. Provide detailed explanations of the concepts and methodologies required to solve the practice questions, encouraging the student to work through the problems independently and offering guidance on their approach. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a student's desire for academic advancement and the university's commitment to academic integrity and fair assessment. Addis Ababa University entrance exam regulations, as a guiding framework, emphasize honesty, originality, and adherence to established examination procedures. The challenge lies in discerning between legitimate academic support and unethical assistance that undermines the validity of the entrance examination process. The correct approach involves understanding the spirit and letter of the Addis Ababa University entrance exam regulations concerning academic integrity. This means recognizing that while seeking clarification and guidance on subject matter is permissible, providing direct answers or solutions to exam-style questions, especially those designed to assess a student's independent knowledge and problem-solving abilities, constitutes academic misconduct. The ethical imperative is to uphold the fairness and credibility of the entrance examination, ensuring that all candidates are evaluated on their own merit. This approach aligns with the university's responsibility to maintain high academic standards and to select students who have demonstrated genuine aptitude. Providing direct answers to exam-style questions, even if framed as tutoring, represents a significant ethical and regulatory failure. It directly contravenes the principle of independent assessment, as it allows a student to benefit from knowledge or solutions they have not independently acquired. This undermines the purpose of the entrance exam, which is to gauge a candidate's preparedness and potential. Furthermore, it creates an unfair advantage over other candidates who are preparing through legitimate means. Offering to help a student by sharing past exam papers or specific question types without proper context or emphasis on independent problem solving also falls short. While access to resources can be beneficial, the intent and execution matter. If the help facilitates rote memorization or the acquisition of answers rather than genuine understanding and application, it becomes problematic. The university's regulations implicitly discourage any practice that circumvents the intended assessment of a student's own capabilities. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding of the university's academic integrity policies. Professionals should always err on the side of caution when faced with requests that could be interpreted as facilitating academic dishonesty. This involves 1. Clearly defining the boundaries of permissible assistance, focusing on conceptual understanding and skill development rather than direct answer provision. 2. Educating students about academic integrity and the consequences of misconduct. And 3. Refusing any request that appears to compromise the fairness and validity of the assessment process. The ultimate goal is to support student learning while upholding the integrity of the academic institution. Question 7. Market research demonstrates that a significant number of small and medium-sized enterprises, SME, in Ethiopia struggle with maintaining accurate and compliant financial records due to limited resources and expertise. As an auditor engaged by one such SME, you discover substantial discrepancies between the company's reported revenues and the underlying transaction data, suggesting potential misstatement. The company's management insists that these are minor clerical errors and urges you to proceed with the audit based on their provided figures to avoid delays and potential penalties. Which of the following represents the most professionally sound and ethically compliant course of action? Option A. Adjust the client's financial records yourself to align with your understanding of the correct figures, without explicit client instruction or further verification. Option B. Conduct a thorough independent verification of all underlying transaction data to identify the root cause of the discrepancies. Engage in a detailed professional discussion with management to understand and resolve these issues, and only then finalize the audit report based on verified and accurate financial information. Option C. Accept management's explanation of clerical errors and proceed with the audit based on the provided figures to meet the client's deadline and maintain a positive working relationship. Option D. Immediately report the suspected misstatements to the Ethiopian Revenue and Customs Authority without further investigation or discussion with the client. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough independent verification of all underlying transaction data to identify the root cause of the discrepancies. Engage in a detailed professional discussion with management to understand and resolve these issues, and only then finalize the audit report based on verified and accurate financial information. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the ethical obligation to maintain client confidentiality and the regulatory requirement for accurate financial reporting, as stipulated by Ethiopian law and the Addis Ababa University entrance exams implied framework for professional conduct in accounting and finance. The core conflict lies in balancing the duty to a client with the broader responsibility to uphold the integrity of financial information. Careful judgment is required to navigate this situation without compromising either ethical or legal standards. The correct approach involves a thorough, independent verification of the client's financial records and a direct, professional discussion with the client about any discrepancies found. This aligns with the principles of professional skepticism and due diligence expected of accountants and financial professionals. Specifically, Ethiopian accounting standards and professional ethics codes mandate that practitioners must act with integrity and objectivity and report financial information truthfully and accurately. If discrepancies are identified that cannot be resolved through discussion with the client, the professional has a duty to report these findings appropriately, which may involve escalating the issue within the firm or, in severe cases, to regulatory bodies, while still respecting client confidentiality as much as possible by focusing on factual reporting of the financial situation. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the discrepancies and proceed with the audit or review as if the records were accurate. This directly violates the ethical duty of integrity and the regulatory requirement for accurate financial reporting. It also demonstrates a failure of professional skepticism, a cornerstone of auditing and financial review. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately report the client to authorities without first attempting to understand and resolve the discrepancies with the client. This could be premature, potentially damaging to the client relationship, and may not be in line with the graduated response expected in professional practice, which prioritizes resolution and accurate reporting over immediate punitive action unless absolutely necessary. A third incorrect approach would be to alter the client's records to match the auditor's expectations without the client's explicit instruction and proper documentation. This constitutes professional misconduct and potentially fraud, as it involves misrepresenting financial data. Professionals should approach such situations by first adhering to the principle of professional skepticism, questioning information that appears inconsistent or questionable. This should be followed by a systematic process of investigation and verification. Open and professional communication with the client is crucial to understand the reasons behind any discrepancies. If resolution is not achieved, professionals must then consider their reporting obligations and the appropriate escalation procedures as dictated by professional standards and Ethiopian law, always prioritizing accuracy and integrity. Question 8. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of a grading error in a specific subject area, coupled with a high potential impact on student admissions if such an error occurs. A student, having received their results, expresses significant distress and claims a clear discrepancy between their perceived performance and the recorded score, requesting an immediate review outside the standard appeals window. What is the most appropriate course of action for the examination administration? Option A. Initiate a formal review of the student's examination script according to the university's established appeals process, even if it is slightly outside the standard window, provided the request is made promptly after result release. Option B. Immediately regrade the student's paper to alleviate their distress and prevent potential negative publicity. Option C. Suggest the student contact the specific examiner directly to discuss their concerns and seek a personal adjustment. Option D. Advise the student that the appeals window has closed and no further action can be taken, as per standard procedure. The correct answer is A. Initiate a formal review of the student's examination script according to the university's established appeals process, even if it is slightly outside the standard window, provided the request is made promptly after result release. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the university's commitment to academic integrity with the practicalities of managing student admissions under pressure. The Addis Ababa University entrance exam regulations, while not explicitly detailed here, are understood to prioritize fairness, transparency, and the selection of qualified candidates. The risk matrix, a common tool in academic and administrative settings, highlights potential issues that could compromise these principles. A deep analysis of the situation necessitates understanding the ethical obligations of exam administrators and the potential consequences of deviating from established procedures. The correct approach involves a thorough, documented investigation into the discrepancy, adhering strictly to the established appeals process outlined by Addis Ababa University. This process is designed to ensure that all claims are treated equitably and that decisions are based on objective evidence rather than assumptions or external pressures. By following the formal appeals procedure, administrators uphold the principles of fairness and due process, which are fundamental to maintaining the credibility of the entrance examination. This approach also provides a clear audit trail, essential for accountability and future process improvement. An incorrect approach would be to immediately grant a reevaluation based solely on the student's emotional appeal without verifying the initial grading. This bypasses the established procedures and could set a precedent for preferential treatment, undermining the integrity of the entire examination system. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the student's concern outright without any investigation, which would be unethical and could lead to accusations of bias or negligence. Finally, attempting to resolve the issue informally outside of the official channels, perhaps by pressuring the grading staff for a quick adjustment, would violate principles of transparency and could lead to accusations of impropriety. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established regulations and ethical guidelines. This involves 1. Acknowledging the concern and initiating the formal process. 2. Gathering all relevant documentation and evidence. 3. Conducting a fair and impartial review according to university policy. 4. Communicating the decision clearly and providing justification. 5. Documenting the entire process for accountability. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are not only procedurally sound, but also ethically defensible, safeguarding the reputation and fairness of the Addis Ababa University entrance exam. Question 9. The assessment process reveals that a prospective student preparing for the Addis Ababa University entrance examination is unsure about the acceptable boundaries of seeking clarification on exam instructions. They have heard conflicting advice from peers regarding whether it is permissible to ask the invigilator to rephrase a question if it is unclear, or if this constitutes an attempt to gain an unfair advantage. Which of the following best reflects the expected conduct of a candidate during the Addis Ababa University entrance examination concerning clarification of instructions? Option A. A candidate should assume all questions are clear and proceed with their best interpretation, as seeking any form of clarification from the invigilator is strictly forbidden. Option B. A candidate may ask the invigilator for hints or suggestions on how to approach an unclear question, as this demonstrates initiative. Option C. A candidate may politely request the invigilator to rephrase an unclear question to ensure proper understanding of the prompt, as long as no part of the question's content or intended answer is revealed. Option D. A candidate may discuss the unclear question with neighboring candidates to collectively decipher its meaning before answering. The correct answer is C. A candidate may politely request the invigilator to rephrase an unclear question to ensure proper understanding of the prompt, as long as no part of the question's content or intended answer is revealed. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a scenario where a student is seeking to understand the foundational principles of academic integrity, as mandated by Addis Ababa University's entrance examination regulations. This is professionally challenging because it requires not only an understanding of the rules, but also the ability to apply them to a hypothetical situation, ensuring adherence to the university's specific ethical code for prospective students. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between acceptable and unacceptable actions that could compromise the integrity of the examination process. The correct approach involves recognizing that the primary objective of the entrance exam is to assess a student's individual knowledge and aptitude without external assistance. This aligns with Addis Ababa University's commitment to fair and equitable evaluation, as implicitly understood within the context of any reputable academic institution's entrance procedures. The ethical justification lies in upholding the principle of honesty and meritocracy, ensuring that all candidates are evaluated on a level playing field. An incorrect approach would be to assume that any form of collaboration or information sharing, even if seemingly minor, is permissible. This fails to acknowledge the strict prohibition against cheating and academic dishonesty, which are fundamental to maintaining the credibility of the university's admissions process. Another incorrect approach would be to believe that the exam is solely about memorization, neglecting the importance of understanding and applying knowledge independently. This misunderstands the purpose of an entrance examination, which aims to gauge a student's analytical and problem-solving skills. Finally, an approach that prioritizes obtaining a high score through any means necessary, disregarding ethical considerations, directly violates the spirit and letter of academic integrity regulations. Professionals should approach such situations by first identifying the core ethical principles at play, such as honesty, fairness, and integrity. They should then consult the specific guidelines and regulations of the institution in question. In this case, Addis Ababa University's entrance exam framework. Finally, they should apply these principles and regulations to the given scenario, making a decision that upholds the highest standards of academic conduct. Question 10. The assessment process reveals that a significant number of applicants for the Addis Ababa University Faculty of Engineering come from diverse secondary school backgrounds, with varying levels of exposure to advanced physics and mathematics concepts. To ensure a fair and effective entrance examination that accurately identifies candidates with the potential for engineering studies, which of the following approaches would be most appropriate? Option A. Include questions that require in-depth knowledge of specialized physics and mathematics curricula from a select few high-performing secondary schools. Option B. Focus the examination primarily on memorization of scientific formulas and definitions, assuming this demonstrates a strong foundation. Option C. Design the examination to heavily favor candidates who have participated in national or international science Olympiads, assuming they possess superior aptitude. Option D. Develop questions that test fundamental principles of physics and mathematics, emphasizing logical reasoning and problem-solving skills applicable to engineering, rather than specific advanced topics. The correct answer is D. Develop questions that test fundamental principles of physics and mathematics, emphasizing logical reasoning and problem-solving skills applicable to engineering, rather than specific advanced topics. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge in university entrance exams, ensuring fairness and integrity while accommodating diverse learning backgrounds. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for a standardized evaluation with the ethical obligation to provide equitable opportunities for all candidates, regardless of their prior educational experiences. Careful judgment is required to design an assessment that accurately measures aptitude for higher education without unfairly disadvantaging certain groups. The correct approach involves designing assessment questions that focus on fundamental reasoning, problem-solving skills, and conceptual understanding, rather than rote memorization or knowledge specific to a particular curriculum that might not be universally taught. This aligns with the ethical principle of fairness and the regulatory guideline of ensuring that entrance examinations are a valid measure of a candidate's potential to succeed in university-level studies. By emphasizing core competencies, the assessment aims to identify students who possess the intellectual capacity to learn and adapt, which is the ultimate goal of an entrance examination. An incorrect approach would be to include questions that rely heavily on specific syllabi or advanced topics not covered in the general secondary education curriculum of Ethiopia. This would be ethically problematic as it creates an uneven playing field, favoring students from schools with more specialized or resource-rich programs. Such an approach would violate the principle of equitable access to higher education, as it would not be a true measure of a candidate's inherent ability, but rather their exposure to specific, potentially privileged, educational content. Another incorrect approach would be to use assessment methods that are culturally biased or do not account for linguistic nuances, potentially disadvantaging candidates from diverse linguistic backgrounds within Ethiopia. This would fail to uphold the principle of inclusivity and could lead to misinterpretation of a candidate's true understanding. The professional decision-making process for such situations involves a thorough review of the intended learning outcomes for the university program, an analysis of the typical educational backgrounds of prospective students, and a commitment to designing assessments that are both rigorous and inclusive. This includes piloting questions to identify potential biases and ensuring that the assessment criteria are transparent and applied consistently. The focus should always be on identifying potential for academic success through a fair and objective evaluation of core intellectual capabilities. Question 11. The assessment process reveals that during the Addis Ababa University entrance examination, an applicant was observed to be discreetly looking at notes hidden in their sleeve. Option A. The applicant should be immediately disqualified from the examination and face disciplinary action as per university regulations. Option B. The applicant's examination paper should be graded with a penalty applied for the observed infraction. Option C. The invigilator should confiscate the notes and allow the applicant to continue the examination without further comment. Option D. The applicant should be allowed to continue the examination but warned against future infractions. The correct answer is A. The applicant should be immediately disqualified from the examination and face disciplinary action as per university regulations. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to demonstrate an understanding of the fundamental principles of academic integrity and ethical conduct expected of students at Addis Ababa University, specifically within the context of an entrance examination. The challenge lies in distinguishing between acceptable and unacceptable forms of assistance and recognizing the potential for misinterpretation or deliberate circumvention of examination rules. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the applicant's actions align with the university's commitment to fair and equitable assessment. The correct approach involves the applicant independently completing the examination without seeking or receiving any unauthorized assistance. This upholds the principle of academic honesty, which is a cornerstone of university education. By relying solely on their own knowledge and understanding, the applicant demonstrates their genuine preparedness for the program and respects the integrity of the entrance examination process. This aligns with the implicit ethical guidelines of any academic institution, including Addis Ababa University, which mandate that all submitted work must be the applicant's own. An incorrect approach involves the applicant receiving answers from another individual during the examination. This constitutes academic dishonesty and a violation of examination regulations. It undermines the fairness of the assessment by giving the applicant an unfair advantage over others who are completing the exam independently. This action directly contravenes the expectation of integrity and personal effort inherent in any university entrance process. Another incorrect approach involves the applicant using unauthorized reference materials. This is also a form of academic misconduct. The entrance examination is designed to assess the applicant's existing knowledge and aptitude, not their ability to find information. The use of unauthorized materials bypasses the intended assessment and misrepresents the applicant's capabilities. This violates the principle of honest representation of one's abilities, a fundamental ethical requirement in academic settings. A further incorrect approach involves the applicant attempting to communicate with someone outside the examination hall for assistance. This is a clear breach of examination security and rules. It demonstrates a lack of respect for the examination process and an intent to gain an unfair advantage. Such actions are universally considered unacceptable in academic assessments and would lead to disqualification. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves a clear understanding of the examination rules and ethical expectations. Applicants should always prioritize independent work and seek clarification on any ambiguities regarding acceptable practices. When faced with a situation where assistance might be offered or temptation arises, the applicant must firmly adhere to the principles of honesty and integrity, recognizing that the long-term value of their education is built on a foundation of genuine achievement. Question 12. The monitoring system demonstrates a pattern of unusual activity in the digital submission portal for the Addis Ababa University entrance exam, specifically concerning a small subset of applicant files. This activity appears to involve repeated access to specific sections of the application forms by an unknown internal user. What is the most appropriate course of action to investigate this anomaly while upholding the integrity of the examination and respecting applicant privacy? Option A. Discuss the observed pattern with colleagues informally to gather their opinions on what might be causing the system activity. Option B. Disregard the system alert as a potential technical glitch, assuming it will resolve itself without intervention. Option C. Immediately initiate a formal inquiry through the university's designated IT security and examination oversight committees, requesting authorized access to audit logs and relevant system data to identify the nature and source of the activity. Option D. Directly access the applicant files in question to manually review their contents for any irregularities that might explain the system activity. The correct answer is C. Immediately initiate a formal inquiry through the university's designated IT security and examination oversight committees, requesting authorized access to audit logs and relevant system data to identify the nature and source of the activity. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance the immediate need for information with the ethical and regulatory obligations concerning data privacy and security. The Addis Ababa University entrance exam framework, while not explicitly detailed here, generally emphasizes academic integrity, fairness, and the responsible handling of information related to applicants. The core tension lies in accessing potentially useful data versus respecting the privacy rights of individuals, and adhering to any established protocols for data access and use within the university's entrance examination process. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any actions taken are both effective in supporting the examination's integrity and compliant with the spirit and letter of the university's regulations. The correct approach involves a systematic and authorized process for data review. This means initiating a formal request through the appropriate channels within Addis Ababa University, outlining the specific concerns and the data required for investigation. This approach upholds the principles of due process and ensures that any data accessed is done so legitimately and for a clearly defined purpose, aligning with the university's commitment to fair examination practices and data protection. It respects the established administrative procedures and prevents unauthorized access or misuse of sensitive applicant information. An incorrect approach of directly accessing applicant files without authorization represents a significant breach of privacy and academic integrity. This action bypasses established protocols, potentially violating university policies on data handling and applicant confidentiality. It undermines the trust placed in the examination process and could lead to accusations of bias or unfair treatment. Another incorrect approach of relying solely on anecdotal evidence or informal observations without seeking to verify through official channels is professionally unsound. This method lacks objectivity and can lead to unsubstantiated conclusions, potentially harming applicants based on hearsay rather than concrete evidence. It fails to adhere to the rigorous standards expected in an academic assessment environment. A third incorrect approach of ignoring the anomaly altogether is also professionally negligent. Failing to investigate a potential issue, even if it seems minor, can allow systemic problems to persist, compromising the fairness and validity of the entrance examination. It demonstrates a lack of diligence and a disregard for the integrity of the assessment process. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve: first, identifying the anomaly or concern; second, consulting relevant university regulations and ethical guidelines pertaining to applicant data and examination integrity; third, determining the most appropriate and authorized method for investigation, which typically involves formal communication and requests; and fourth, acting strictly within those authorized parameters, ensuring all actions are documented and justifiable. Question 13. The assessment process reveals that during a practice session for the Addis Ababa University entrance exam, a fellow applicant is observed extensively copying answers from another applicant's paper, despite clear instructions that this is a solo assessment. What is the most appropriate course of action to uphold the integrity of the examination process? Option A. Discuss the observed behavior with other applicants to gauge their opinions before taking any action. Option B. Confront the applicant directly and ask them to stop copying. Option C. Ignore the behavior, assuming it is a minor infraction and not wanting to cause conflict. Option D. Discreetly report the observed copying to the examination invigilator or designated university official. The correct answer is D. Discreetly report the observed copying to the examination invigilator or designated university official. Explanation: the assessment process reveals a common challenge in academic integrity: the subtle line between collaborative learning and academic misconduct. Students often struggle to understand the boundaries of acceptable assistance, especially in university entrance exams where the pressure to perform is high. This scenario requires careful judgment to distinguish between legitimate study methods and actions that undermine the fairness and validity of the examination. The correct approach involves understanding and adhering to the Addis Ababa University-specific regulations regarding academic honesty and examination conduct. This includes recognizing that, while group study and discussion of concepts are encouraged, submitting work that is not one's own or using unauthorized aids during the exam constitutes a violation. The Addis Ababa University Entrance Exam Guidelines, as stipulated by the Ministry of Education and the university itself, strictly prohibit any form of cheating, plagiarism, or unauthorized collaboration during the examination period. Therefore, reporting suspected misconduct, even if it involves a peer, is ethically mandated to uphold the integrity of the assessment. This aligns with the university's commitment to fair evaluation and the principle that each student's performance should reflect their individual knowledge and effort. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the observed behavior, assuming it is a minor issue or not wanting to cause trouble for a peer. This failure to report violates the ethical duty to uphold academic integrity and can lead to an unfair advantage for the student engaging in misconduct, thereby devaluing the achievements of honest students. Another incorrect approach is to confront the student directly and attempt to resolve the issue without involving the appropriate authorities. While well-intentioned, this bypasses the established procedures for handling academic dishonesty and may not result in a proper investigation or consequence, potentially allowing the misconduct to go unaddressed. Furthermore, engaging in similar behavior oneself to level the playing field is a severe ethical and regulatory breach, demonstrating a complete disregard for academic principles and the examination rules. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the university's academic integrity policy and examination regulations. When observing potential misconduct, the first step is to identify the specific behavior and compare it against these established rules. If a violation is suspected, the professional course of action is to report the incident to the designated examination invigilator or relevant university authority, providing factual details of the observation. This ensures that the matter is handled through the proper channels, guaranteeing a fair process for all involved and maintaining the credibility of the examination. Question 14. The assessment process reveals that a candidate for the Addis Ababa University entrance exam has submitted a high school transcript that appears to have been altered to inflate grades, a discrepancy noted during the verification of academic records against official secondary school databases. Option A. Overlook the discrepancy, assuming it was an administrative error by the secondary school, and proceed with the candidate's application. Option B. Immediately disqualify the candidate for academic dishonesty and report the incident to the relevant academic integrity committee. Option C. Focus on the candidate's overall academic performance and potential, using the transcript discrepancy as a minor point of consideration in the final admission decision. Option D. Contact the candidate to request an explanation for the discrepancy in the submitted transcript and await their response before proceeding. The correct answer is B. Immediately disqualify the candidate for academic dishonesty and report the incident to the relevant academic integrity committee. Explanation: the assessment process for the Addis Ababa University entrance exam requires candidates to demonstrate a nuanced understanding of the Ethiopian educational system and its regulatory framework. This scenario is professionally challenging because it tests the ability to apply general principles of academic integrity within the specific context of Ethiopian higher education admission regulations. Candidates must not only identify ethical breaches, but also understand the procedural implications as defined by the university's entrance exam guidelines. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the candidate's submitted materials against the explicit requirements and prohibitions outlined in the Addis Ababa University entrance exam regulations. This includes verifying the authenticity of documents, ensuring adherence to submission deadlines, and confirming that no form of academic dishonesty, as defined by the university, has occurred. The regulatory justification lies in upholding the fairness and integrity of the admission process, which is paramount for maintaining the university's standards and ensuring equal opportunity for all applicants. The Addis Ababa University entrance exam guidelines, like those of most reputable institutions, strictly prohibit any form of cheating, falsification of documents, or misrepresentation of qualifications. Adhering to these rules is not merely an ethical consideration, but a mandatory regulatory requirement for admission. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the discrepancy without further investigation, assuming it is a minor oversight. This fails to uphold the regulatory requirement for due diligence in verifying applicant credentials and could lead to admitting unqualified or dishonest candidates, thereby undermining the integrity of the entire admission process. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately disqualify the candidate without providing an opportunity to explain the discrepancy. While academic integrity is crucial, university regulations often include procedural fairness, which may involve seeking clarification or allowing for a response to allegations before a final decision is made. This approach risks violating procedural fairness principles that are implicitly or explicitly part of the university's operational guidelines. A third incorrect approach would be to focus solely on the perceived intent of the candidate rather than the objective violation of the stated regulations. The entrance exam regulations are designed to be applied objectively. Therefore, focusing on intent without addressing the factual breach of rules is insufficient for a proper regulatory assessment. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves a systematic approach. First, identify the specific regulation or guideline that appears to have been violated. Second, gather all relevant evidence pertaining to the alleged violation. Third, consult the official university entrance exam regulations to understand the prescribed procedures for handling such cases, including any provisions for investigation, appeal, or clarification. Fourth, make a decision based on the objective evidence and the explicit regulatory framework, ensuring fairness and consistency. Question 15. The assessment process reveals that a candidate for the Addis Ababa University entrance exam encounters a section with instructions that are unclear regarding the use of supplementary materials. The candidate is unsure whether a specific type of non-programmable calculator is permitted. Which of the following actions best demonstrates adherence to the principles of academic integrity and the guidelines of the Addis Ababa University entrance exam? Option A. Candidate contacts the Examination Administration Office to seek explicit clarification on the calculator policy before proceeding with that section of the exam. Option B. The candidate decides to err on the side of caution and refrains from using the calculator, even if it might be permitted, to avoid any potential violation. Option C. The candidate assumes that since the calculator is non-programmable, it is permitted and proceeds to use it. Option D. The candidate observes what other candidates are doing and uses the calculator if they see others doing so. The correct answer is A. The The candidate contacts the examination administration office to seek explicit clarification on the calculator policy before proceeding with that section of the exam. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an applicant to demonstrate a nuanced understanding of the Addis Ababa University entrance exam's regulatory framework, specifically concerning the ethical conduct expected of candidates. The challenge lies in identifying the approach that best aligns with the principles of academic integrity and fairness, which are foundational to any reputable educational institution's admission process. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between acceptable and unacceptable behaviors that could compromise the validity of the examination. The correct approach involves proactively seeking clarification from the examination authorities regarding any ambiguities in the instructions. This represents best professional practice because it upholds the principle of fairness by ensuring all candidates operate under the same clear understanding of the rules. It demonstrates integrity and a commitment to adhering to the established guidelines, thereby respecting the examination's authority and the efforts of other candidates. This proactive communication aligns with the implicit ethical obligation to participate in the examination honestly and transparently, as expected by Addis Ababa University. An incorrect approach that involves attempting to interpret ambiguous instructions based on personal assumptions or peer advice fails to uphold academic integrity. This can lead to unintentional violations of the examination rules, potentially resulting in disqualification. It demonstrates a lack of diligence in understanding the official requirements and a disregard for the established procedures for seeking clarification. Another incorrect approach, which is to ignore ambiguous instructions and proceed with the examination without seeking guidance, is also professionally unacceptable. This reflects a passive or indifferent attitude toward the rules, which can be interpreted as a willingness to take advantage of uncertainty or a lack of respect for the examination process. It fails to demonstrate the proactive engagement and commitment to fairness that Addis Ababa University expects from its prospective students. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the governing rules and regulations. When faced with ambiguity, the primary step should always be to consult the official documentation or designated authority for clarification. This ensures that actions are taken with full knowledge and adherence to the established framework, thereby safeguarding both the individual's integrity and the fairness of the process. Question 16. The assessment process reveals that a candidate is preparing for the Addis Ababa University entrance exam and is asked to explain the principles of academic integrity as they apply to examination conditions. The candidate has extensive knowledge of academic integrity policies from various international institutions, but is unsure how to tailor their response to the specific context of the Ethiopian higher education system and the Addis Ababa University entrance exam regulations. Which approach best demonstrates the candidate's readiness for this exam? Option A. Prioritizing the candidate's personal understanding and interpretation of academic integrity, emphasizing their own ethical standards and how they believe examinations should be conducted, regardless of formal regulations. Option B. Focusing exclusively on the principles of academic integrity as defined by the Ethiopian Ministry of Education's directives and any specific guidelines issued by Addis Ababa University for its entrance examinations, ensuring all examples and explanations are relevant to the Ethiopian context. Option C. Providing a comprehensive overview of academic integrity principles, drawing examples from a wide range of international best practices and renowned universities globally to showcase a broad understanding of the concept. Option D. Explaining academic integrity using general ethical principles that are universally accepted without referencing any specific national or institutional regulations to ensure the answer is broadly applicable. Correct answer is B. Focusing exclusively on the principles of academic integrity as defined by the Ethiopian Ministry of Education's directives and any specific guidelines issued by Addis Ababa University for its entrance examinations, ensuring all examples and explanations are relevant to the Ethiopian context. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge for students preparing for university entrance exams: the need to demonstrate a nuanced understanding of the examination scope and the specific regulatory framework governing it. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires not just knowledge of the subject matter, but also the ability to critically evaluate information and adhere strictly to prescribed guidelines, mirroring real-world professional environments where compliance and accuracy are paramount. Careful judgment is required to discern between relevant and irrelevant information, and to apply knowledge within the defined boundaries of the assessment. The correct approach involves meticulously adhering to the specified regulatory framework for the Addis Ababa University entrance exam. This means understanding that only the laws, regulations, and guidelines pertinent to this specific exam in Ethiopia are to be considered. This approach is right because it directly addresses the core requirement of the assessment, demonstrating jurisdiction-specific knowledge and compliance. The regulatory framework for Ethiopian university entrance exams dictates the scope of knowledge and the acceptable methods of answering questions. By focusing solely on this framework, the student shows an understanding of the exam's parameters and the importance of adhering to its rules, which is a fundamental ethical and professional obligation in any academic or professional setting. An incorrect approach would be to incorporate knowledge or regulations from other countries or general international standards. This fails because it demonstrates a lack of understanding of the exam's specific jurisdiction. University entrance exams are designed to test a candidate's preparedness for a particular educational system and its governing principles. Introducing external regulations suggests an inability to differentiate between relevant and irrelevant information, and a disregard for the explicit instructions of the examination body. This is an ethical failure as it misrepresents the candidate's knowledge base, and an academic failure as it does not answer the question as intended. Another incorrect approach would be to use generic regulatory terms without grounding them in the specific Ethiopian context. This is problematic because it lacks the precision required for a high-stakes examination. While general principles of regulation might exist, their application and interpretation are often context-dependent. Failing to specify or apply these principles within the Ethiopian framework means the answer is not tailored to the exam's requirements, thus failing to demonstrate the necessary depth of understanding. This is an analytical failure, indicating a superficial grasp of the subject matter and its specific application. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves a clear multi-step approach. 1. Deconstruct the prompt. Identify all explicit constraints including jurisdiction, topic, and formatting requirements. 2. Isolate the relevant framework. Determine the exact set of laws, regulations, and guidelines that apply. 3. Filter information. Discard any information or knowledge that falls outside the defined framework. 4. Apply knowledge. Use the filtered information to construct an answer that directly addresses the question within the specified constraints. 5. Review and verify. Ensure the answer strictly adheres to all stated requirements, especially jurisdictional and ethical considerations. Question 17. Cost-benefit analysis shows that a proposed new construction project on university land offers significant immediate financial returns through increased rental income. However, the project site is adjacent to a sensitive wetland area crucial for local biodiversity and water regulation. The analysis highlights potential, though not precisely quantified, risks of habitat disruption and water quality degradation. Which of the following approaches best reflects responsible decision-making in this context, considering the Addis Ababa University entrance exam's implied emphasis on ethical and sustainable development? Option A. Halt the project immediately and seek alternative locations, prioritizing the absolute preservation of the wetland regardless of the economic implications for the university. Option B. Proceed with the project but allocate a small portion of the rental income to a general environmental fund, assuming this adequately offsets any potential negative impacts. Option C. Proceed with the construction project, as the quantifiable financial benefits outweigh the speculative environmental risks, and any minor environmental impacts can be addressed through future, less rigorous mitigation efforts. Option D. Commission a thorough and independent environmental and social impact assessment (EISA) to rigorously quantify potential risks and benefits, explore mitigation and compensation strategies, and involve relevant stakeholders in the decision-making process before proceeding. Correct answer is C. Proceed with the construction project, as the quantifiable financial benefits outweigh the speculative environmental risks, and any minor environmental impacts can be addressed through future, less rigorous mitigation efforts. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate financial benefits of a proposed project against its potential long-term environmental and social impacts, which are often harder to quantify. The Addis Ababa University entrance exam context implies a need to consider the ethical responsibilities of future professionals and the university's role in fostering sustainable development within Ethiopia. Careful judgment is required to ensure that decisions align with national development goals and ethical principles, even when faced with compelling economic arguments. The correct approach involves prioritizing a comprehensive assessment that integrates environmental and social considerations alongside economic factors. This aligns with the principles of sustainable development, which are increasingly embedded in Ethiopian policy and international best practices. Specifically, it requires adherence to Ethiopian environmental impact assessment regulations and ethical guidelines that mandate responsible decision-making, considering the well-being of current and future generations. This approach ensures that the university, as an institution and its students, upholds a commitment to responsible stewardship. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on maximizing short-term financial returns fails to acknowledge the potential for irreversible environmental damage and negative social consequences. This violates ethical obligations to consider broader societal impacts and may contravene Ethiopian environmental protection laws that require thorough impact assessments and mitigation strategies. Another incorrect approach that dismisses potential environmental concerns due to their intangible nature overlooks the long-term economic costs associated with environmental degradation and the ethical imperative to protect natural resources. This demonstrates a lack of foresight and a disregard for the principles of environmental justice, an approach that prioritizes immediate project approval without adequate stakeholder consultation or independent review risks overlooking critical issues, and can lead to decisions that are not in the best interest of the community or the environment, thereby failing to meet ethical standards of transparency and accountability. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the problem and identifying all relevant stakeholders. This is followed by gathering comprehensive data, including economic, environmental, and social factors. A thorough risk assessment and the development of mitigation strategies are crucial. The evaluation of alternatives should then be conducted using a multi-criteria decision analysis that weighs all identified factors, guided by relevant Ethiopian laws and ethical principles. Finally, the decision should be transparently communicated and subject to review. Question 18. The assessment process reveals a discrepancy in the allocated examination materials for a specific subject, where a candidate appears to have received a slightly different version of a supplementary document than what was officially distributed to others. Option A. Discuss the observed anomaly with other candidates to gauge their experiences before reporting it. Option B. Immediately notify the invigilator of the observed discrepancy and await further instructions from the examination board. Option C. Discreetly attempt to exchange the supplementary document with another candidate to ensure uniformity. Option D. Ignore the discrepancy and proceed with the examination as normal, assuming it is a minor oversight. The correct answer is B. Immediately notify the invigilator of the observed discrepancy and await further instructions from the examination board. Explanation. The assessment process for the Addis Ababa University entrance exam requires candidates to demonstrate a nuanced understanding of the Ethiopian legal and regulatory landscape as it pertains to academic integrity and institutional governance. This scenario is professionally challenging because it tests the ability to apply ethical principles and regulatory guidelines in a situation where there is potential for both academic misconduct and the misinterpretation of institutional policies. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between legitimate academic inquiry and actions that could compromise the integrity of the examination process. The correct approach involves a direct and transparent communication with the examination board, clearly stating the observed anomaly and requesting clarification or guidance. This represents best professional practice because it adheres to the principle of fairness and due process, ensuring that any potential issues are addressed systematically and according to established procedures. It aligns with the spirit of academic integrity by prioritizing the accurate and equitable administration of the exam. Ethically, It upholds the responsibility to report concerns that could impact the validity of the assessment. An incorrect approach of ignoring the anomaly would be a failure to uphold the responsibility to ensure a fair examination environment. This neglects the ethical obligation to act with diligence and integrity in academic matters. Another incorrect approach of attempting to rectify the situation independently without authorization would constitute a breach of institutional protocols and could be construed as an attempt to manipulate the examination process, thereby undermining academic integrity and violating established administrative procedures. A further incorrect approach of discussing the anomaly with other candidates before reporting it would risk creating undue anxiety, spreading misinformation, and potentially influencing the behavior of others, thereby compromising the controlled environment of the examination. Professionals in such situations should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established rules and ethical conduct. This involves first identifying the nature of the concern, then consulting relevant institutional policies and regulations, and finally, communicating the issue through the designated channels in a clear and factual manner, seeking official guidance rather than acting unilaterally or engaging in speculation. Question 19. The audit findings indicate that a discrepancy exists between the stated academic qualifications on a prospective student's application and the supporting documentation provided, specifically regarding the authenticity of a crucial certificate. The admissions committee is tasked with determining the appropriate course of action. Option A. Advise the admissions officer to discreetly obtain a corrected certificate from the applicant without formally documenting the discrepancy or the verification process. Option B. Immediately reject the applicant's application due to the unverified documentation without further investigation or communication with the applicant. Option C. Initiate a formal verification process with the issuing institution of the certificate and request a clear explanation for the discrepancy from the applicant, suspending the admission decision until the matter is resolved. Option D. Proceed with the admission of the applicant, assuming the discrepancy is a minor administrative oversight and that the applicant's overall profile warrants admission. The correct answer is C. Initiate a formal verification process with the issuing institution of the certificate and request a clear explanation for the discrepancy from the applicant, suspending the admission decision until the matter is resolved. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential breach of academic integrity and adherence to Addis Ababa University's regulations concerning student admissions and record keeping. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the admissions committee to balance the need for accurate record keeping and adherence to university policy with the potential for human error or misinterpretation of documentation. The integrity of the university's admissions process and the validity of student records are at stake, necessitating a thorough and impartial investigation. The correct approach involves a systematic review of the applicant's documentation against the established admission criteria and the university's stated policies for handling discrepancies. This approach is justified by the Addis Ababa University's commitment to fair and transparent admissions, as outlined in its academic regulations. Specifically, university policies typically mandate that all admission decisions must be based on verifiable documentation, and that any inconsistencies must be investigated and resolved according to established procedures. This ensures that all applicants are treated equitably and that the university maintains accurate records of its student body. An incorrect approach would be to immediately reject the applicant based on the initial discrepancy without further investigation. This fails to acknowledge the possibility of administrative error or a valid explanation for the discrepancy, potentially leading to an unfair outcome and a violation of due process principles embedded in university regulations. Another incorrect approach would be to overlook the discrepancy and proceed with admission, assuming it is a minor issue. This compromises the integrity of the admissions process and university records, potentially admitting students who do not meet the required standards and undermining the credibility of the institution. Finally, an approach that involves pressuring the admissions officer to approve the admission despite the discrepancy, without proper documentation or justification, would be a severe ethical and regulatory failure, potentially constituting a cover-up and violating principles of accountability. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to university regulations, fairness to the applicant, and the integrity of the admissions process. This involves 1. Clearly identifying the discrepancy and the relevant university policies. 2. Initiating a formal investigation to gather all necessary information and explanations. 3. Evaluating the findings objectively against the established criteria. And 4. Making a decision that is both compliant with regulations and ethically sound, with clear documentation of the process and rationale. Question 20. Upon reviewing the examination scripts from the Addis Ababa University entrance exam, a proctor observes a student using a pre-written note containing formulas and definitions that were explicitly stated as not permitted during the exam. The proctor confiscates the note and the student's script. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the proctor, strictly adhering to Addis Ababa University's academic integrity guidelines? Option A. Ignore the note and allow the student to continue the exam, as the formulas might be commonly known. Option B. Discreetly return the note to the student and warn them to refrain from using it for the remainder of the exam, allowing the script to be submitted. Option C. Confiscate the student's script and the unauthorized note and report the incident to the examination supervisor for further investigation according to university policy. Option D. Immediately disqualify the student from the exam and escort them out of the examination hall without further documentation. The correct answer is C. Confiscate the student's script and the unauthorized note, and report the incident to the examination supervisor for further investigation according to university policy. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a student's desire for academic success and the university's commitment to academic integrity. The Addis Ababa University entrance exam regulations, as well as general academic ethical guidelines, strictly prohibit any form of cheating or academic dishonesty. The challenge lies in identifying and responding to such behavior in a manner that is both fair to the student and upholds the university's standards. The correct approach involves a thorough and impartial investigation of the alleged misconduct, adhering strictly to the established procedures outlined by Addis Ababa University. This means gathering all relevant evidence, providing the student with an opportunity to respond to the allegations, and ensuring that any disciplinary action is proportionate and consistent with university policy. This approach is ethically sound and legally compliant with the university's academic regulations, which prioritize fairness, due process, and the maintenance of academic standards. An incorrect approach would be to immediately dismiss the student without a proper investigation. This fails to provide the student with due process, a fundamental principle in academic and legal settings. It also risks making an erroneous judgment, potentially penalizing a student unfairly. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the evidence and take no action, which undermines the university's commitment to academic integrity and creates an environment where dishonesty may be tolerated. This violates the university's ethical obligation to ensure a fair and honest academic environment for all students. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes evidence-based judgment, adherence to established procedures, and fairness. This involves 1. Recognizing the seriousness of academic misconduct allegations. 2. Initiating a formal investigation process as per university regulations. 3. Collecting and reviewing all evidence objectively. 4. Providing the accused student with a clear explanation of the allegations and an opportunity to present their defense. 5. Consulting relevant university policies and guidelines for disciplinary actions. And 6. Making a decision based on the findings of the investigation and the university's established disciplinary framework.